So, how to grow your confidence. This is an important topic because it brings together a lot of different elements of the things that I discuss and the things that we do. So, there's two main methods to improve your confidence, and they're very different. The first one is external focused, so it's about competence, building competence. And that, of course, means doing an activity again and again until you feel less afraid to do it and you feel more confident. And that works especially well with something that, for example, is heavily reliant on your motor skills, learning to walk, learning to run, because these things, they eventually become automated. You don't think about them because you've done them so many times. The second method is, of course, mind control. And this is more of an internal method. It relies on you, controlling your own mind to alter your emotional state and to not be fearful, essentially, when doing an activity, by basically silencing the negative thoughts of, anxiety that typically come up. And they have their pros and cons. So mind control, I think, is better when your attention is not significantly distracted. And, for example, let's say you're doing an activity where it requires a lot of your attention, like you're trying to pay attention in a class. It's going to be very hard to do mind control. Not that you can't do it, but it's not necessarily the best approach, i.e., there's different times and situations where mind control might be more suitable. Competence, on the other hand, may not work if, let's say, you're mentally lacking in a situation, or mentally ill, or very anxious. So there's situations where competence just doesn't work. So, for example, 2 years ago, I had this issue where I think it's called a bolus or something, where you feel like there's something in your throat. And I just basically, what happened to me was I couldn't swallow my food when I ate. It was terrifying. And that was nothing to do with competence. Like, I'd been swallowing food since I was born. Otherwise I wouldn't have survived, every single day, multiple times. So it's absolutely nothing to do with competence, but it was just a mental illness, and that's sometimes never curable by just doing something a lot. There are activities where if you do them a lot, you can still be very anxious. And so the competence method doesn't really tackle what's in here. It just tackles the external world, which doesn't always provide a full solution. Competency does have benefits, though. So, it builds confidence. You feel like you can do it since you've done something so many times. And, there is, often with many activities, a curve of your stress during the activity that eventually goes down. But, of course, as I mentioned, for a lot of people, that never really quite goes to the point of being zero. And so that's where you need to think of an alternative method than just, doing something many, many times. Mind control, of course, isn't without its own problems. So it requires much more willpower, first of all. Competence simply requires you to do something, which can also require willpower. Say if it's an activity that's very hard, or making you very anxious to do, then in that case, of course, competence is difficult. But willpower, because it's mental, it's internal, you need to control your mind, you need to control what's in here. And not only does it require more willpower, what I'm trying to really get at as well is that it takes years and years. This takes a long time. Developing control over your mind and your thoughts is not something that you can do in a couple of days. I mean, with competence, there might be an activity where if you just spend like even just a week doing it, you're just way more confident. I mean, I know when I joined uni, I had, terrible social anxiety, and, I went and socialized with a bunch of people, and in 2 weeks, I was significantly less anxious. And obviously that problem didn't fully disappear because it was partly mental and it obviously needs mind control. But still, nonetheless, competence is quicker at doing its job than willpower of course, doing mind control. Even though I would say mind control needs this kind of long-term investment, mind control is ultimately worth it because you're getting results in all areas of your life. You're not just getting results, say, in one thing. With competence, you're getting slightly less anxious with one activity, but with mind control, you're every day, in every part of your life, you're improving, you're getting better, you're developing skills. And so, not only are you going to be finding it easier to do this one activity, you're also just going to feel better in your whole life. And so the long-term rewards of mind control, even though it takes much longer, are extremely worth it. And definitely, so, it's worth the investment. And now your question might be then, which one do I do? And what I would say to that is consider doing both, because the truth is that, these are both important, they're both necessary. I talked about it this whole time as though it's like a choice, but the reality is you need to do both. And some situations are more suited to one than the other, and that's also something you need to figure out. So obviously certain things like skills, simple skills that you develop, motor skills, these are going to be more about competence. Playing the piano isn't really going to have that much to do with mind control as it is with just building the skills. But then imagine if every time you play you were anxious and you self-sabotaged and you couldn't play. And then imagine other activities where that kind of negativity and anxiety is way more rampant. Social situations, in mental illnesses. And so you can see that, and plus the fact that obviously your entire life, your mood is benefited by mind control. You can see that it's not a one or the other choice. It's both. They're both necessary. You need to tackle the external problems of your life and the internal problems in here. They need to be tackled together. Just one or the other isn't sufficient if you really want to build a really good kind of life. And so that's basically the message I want to leave you with is don't be focused on, one or the other. There's people who want to just be spiritual and whatnot, and they just focus on their mind. And then there's people who, they don't care about the mind. This is all bullshit to them. So they only want to focus on external things, but that's not good enough. If you want to develop the top levels of life and living, and beyond things that you can even really imagine are possible, then you really need to be doing both, internal things for your mind and external things to build the reality around you.